The adventure of the Norwood Builder. If one were to look at it from the point of view of a crime expert, said Holmes, London has become an exceedingly dull city since the death of Professor Moriarty. You would find very few respectable citizens who would agree with that opinion, I replied. As he pushed his chair back from the breakfast table, he smiled and said, I must not be selfish. Society has benefited greatly from it. If there is anyone who has suffered, it is this poor specialist who has been left without any occupation. During Moriarty's lifetime, the newspapers were always full of surprises. Very often there would be nothing more than a trifling clue, a faint trace, Watson. Yet just as the slightest vibration at the edge of a web betrays the presence of the spider lying in wait at its center, so these tiny indications were enough to convince me that that immense criminal intellect was at work. Petty thefts, motiveless assaults, sudden outbreaks of disorder, all pointed to the same source. For an investigator accustomed to dealing with major crimes, no capital in Europe offered such opportunities as London did. But now he shrugged his shoulders. The amusing part of it all was that the very man who had caused this scarcity was none other than himself. At the time of this conversation, Holmes had been back for several months. At my friend's request, I had handed over my medical practice and moved back into Baker Street, into his lodgings. The young doctor who took over my practice, a certain Werner, paid the high price I asked without the slightest objection. The truth of the matter only became clear to me years later. It turned out that Dr. Werner was a distant relative of Holmes, and that it was Holmes himself who had provided the money. The few months we spent together were, in fact, far from being as quiet and uneventful as he claimed, for a glance at my notes shows that during that period we were engaged with the affair of the former President Murillo and the case of the Dutch steamship Friesland, which very nearly cost us both our lives. Owing to my friend's cold and proud nature, which rejected all applause and adulation, I had been strictly forbidden to write anything about him, his methods, or his successes. This prohibition, as I have said, has only recently been lifted. After this peculiar complaint, Mr. Sherlock Holmes leaned back in his armchair and began turning the pages of the morning paper slowly, when the violent ringing of the bell startled us. This was followed by loud, crashing noises, as if someone were pounding on the front door. The moment it was opened, we heard hurried footsteps in the hallway and then on the stairs, and immediately afterward a young man burst into the room. His eyes were darting wildly, his clothes were in disarray, his face pale, and he was gasping for breath. He glanced first at me and then at Holmes, and judging by our inquisitive expressions, he realized that he owed us an apology for such an abrupt entrance. "I beg your pardon, Mr. Holmes," he cried. "Please don't be angry with me. I am on the verge of losing my mind, sir. I am the unfortunate John Hector McFarlane." He spoke as though the mere mention of his name should suffice to explain both his frantic behavior and the reason for his visit. Yet from Holmes's impassive expression, I could tell that the name meant no more to him than it did to me. Pushing his tobacco pouch toward the man, Holmes said, "Have a cigarette, Mr. McFarlane. In your present condition, had you applied to Dr. Watson, I am certain he would have prescribed a sedative. The weather has been extremely hot of late. Now, if you feel a little calmer, please take that chair and explain, slowly and clearly, who you are and what you want. You spoke your name as if I ought to know you, but I assure you that the only things I know about you are what are already plainly visible, that you are an unmarried solicitor, a member of a Masonic lodge, and an asthmatic. Being familiar with my friend's methods, it was not difficult for me to see how he had arrived at these conclusions. From the man's untidy clothing, the bundle of papers he carried, the ornament on his watch chain, and his breathing. The visitor, however, stared at him in astonishment. "Yes, Mr. Holmes, all of that is quite correct. And in addition to that, I am at this moment the most miserable man in London. For God's sake, do not abandon me, Mr. Holmes. If they come to arrest me before I finish my story, please secure me enough time to tell you everything. If I know that you are working for me on the outside, I will go to prison willingly." "Arrest you," said Holmes. "That is really most extra, most interesting. On what grounds do you expect to be arrested?" "For the murder of Mr. Jonas Oldacre of Lower Norwood." I could not help noticing that the expression of concern that crossed Holmes's animated face was not entirely devoid of satisfaction. "My dear me," he exclaimed, "only this morning at breakfast I was telling Dr. Watson that the newspapers no longer contain the sensational cases of former days." Our visitor leaned forward and, with a trembling hand, took the Daily Telegraph from Holmes's knees. "Had you looked at this article, sir, you would have understood why I came here. I feel as though everyone is talking about me and this unfortunate affair." Folding the paper back, he opened it to the middle page. "Here it is. If you will permit me, I shall read it. Please listen, Mr. Holmes." The headline runs, "Mysterious Affair at Lower Norwood. Well-known builder missing. Suspected murder and arson. A clue to the suspect. This is the clue they are pursuing, Mr. Holmes, and I have not the slightest doubt that it leads straight to me. I have been followed since leaving London Bridge Station. I am certain that they are merely waiting for the arrest warrant. My poor mother, how terribly she will suffer. The woman's heart will be broken." As he rocked back and forth in his chair, he rubbed his clasped hands together in anguish and despair. I examined with interest this man accused of murder. He was fair-haired, clean-shaven, and handsome. His fear was evident in his blue eyes, his thin, sensitive mouth, and his pallid complexion. He appeared to be about 27 years of age. His bearing and attire marked him as a gentleman, and the signed documents protruding from the pocket of his light summer overcoat hinted at his profession. "We must make the best use of our time," said Holmes. "Watson, would you be so kind as to take the paper and read the paragraph to which the gentleman refers?" Beneath the gloomy headlines indicated by our client, the report ran as follows. "A suspicious incident, believed to involve murder, occurred late last night or in the early hours of this morning at Lower Norwood. The affair concerns Mr. Jonas Oldacre, a builder who had long been established in the district. Oldacre, a 52-year-old bachelor, resided at Deepdean House at the end of Sydenham Road and was well known for his eccentric habits and reclusive lifestyle. Although he had withdrawn from the building business in which he had once amassed a considerable fortune, a large quantity of timber was stored at the rear of his house. At around midnight, passers-by noticed this stack of timber on fire and alerted the fire brigade. Although the brigade arrived promptly, they were powerless in the face of the flames fed by the dry wood and were only able to extinguish the blaze after the entire stack had burned down. Up to this point, the incident bore the appearance of an accidental fire, but newly discovered evidence has given it a far more sinister character. During the fire, the absence of the householder was noted with surprise. Upon investigation, it was found that he was not in the house. His bedroom showed signs of disturbance. The bed had not been slept in, the safe was open, and important papers were scattered about. More significantly, several discoveries were made that may point to a dreadful crime. A small quantity of blood was found in the room, along with an oak walking stick bearing bloodstains on its handle. It is known that Mr. Jonas Oldacre had a visitor in his room on the night of the fire, and the walking stick has been identified as belonging to Mr. John Hector McFarlane, a young London solicitor and junior partner in the firm of Graham and McFarlane of 426 Gresham Buildings. The police have stated that they possess solid evidence regarding the motive for the crime and that startling developments are expected. Although at the time our paper went to press, reports that Mr. John Hector McFarland had already been arrested for the murder of Mr. Jonas Oldacre could not be confirmed. It is at least certain that a warrant has been issued for his arrest. Other grave discoveries have been made in the Norwood investigation. In addition to signs of a struggle in the unfortunate builder's room, the French windows of a ground-floor room were found open, and it appears that a large object was dragged from there to the timber stack. Among the ashes, partially charred remains have also been discovered. According to the police theory, the victim was beaten to death in his room, after which his papers were ransacked. His body was then dragged to the timber pile and finally set alight in order to destroy all evidence of the crime. The investigation has been entrusted to the experienced Scotland Yard Inspector Lestrade, who is, as always, energetically and intelligently following up the clues. Sherlock Holmes listened to this remarkable account with his eyes closed and his fingertips pressed together. "It is a case with some interesting points," he said calmly. "First of all, Mr. McFarland, may I ask how it is that, despite the abundance of evidence apparently sufficient to warrant your arrest, you are still at liberty?" "I live with my family at Torrington Lodge, Blackheath, but as I've been working late with Mr. Jonas Oldacre last night, I stayed at a hotel in Norwood. I knew nothing of what had happened until I boarded the train to go to work. When I picked up the newspaper on the train and read the lines you have just heard, I realized the dreadful position I was in and rushed straight to you to place my fate in your hands. Had I gone to my office or my home, I was certain I would be arrested. A man followed me from London Bridge Station all the way here, and I am absolutely sure that, good heavens, what is this?" Following the ringing of the bell, hurried footsteps were heard on the stairs, and immediately afterward our old friend Lestrade appeared in the doorway. Looking past his shoulder, I could see one or two uniformed police officers waiting outside. "Mr. John Hector McFarland," said Lestrade. Our unfortunate client rose to his feet, his face as pale as chalk. "I arrest you on the charge of the willful murder of Mr. Jonas Oldacre of Lower Norwood." McFarland turned to us with a look of utter despair, then sank back into his chair, exhausted. "One moment, Lestrade," said Holmes. "Arresting this gentleman half an hour sooner or later can make little difference to you. He was just about to tell us what happened from his own point of view, which may be of assistance in solving the case. I do not anticipate any difficulty in solving this case," Lestrade replied curtly. "Nevertheless, I should like to hear the account from the gentleman himself, if you will permit me. It is hardly possible to refuse you, Mr. Holmes. After all, you have rendered considerable assistance to the police in the solution of one or two cases in the past, and you enjoy a high reputation at Scotland Yard," said Lestrade. "However, I must remain present, and I am obliged to remind the gentleman that anything he says may be used as evidence against him in court." "That is exactly all I ask," said our client. "All I want is for you to listen to me and to understand what the absolute truth is." Glancing at his watch, Lestrade said, "I can give you half an hour. First of all, I should like to state that I did not know Mr. Jonas Oldacre personally prior to this affair," McFarland began. "However, my family had known him long ago, so I was familiar with his name. Even so, I was greatly surprised when he entered my office in the city at about 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. I was even more astonished when he explained the purpose of his visit. He carried with him pages torn from a notebook on which something had been scribbled. Here they are. He laid them on my desk and began to speak. "This is my will," he said. "I want you to put it into proper legal form, Mr. McFarland. Meanwhile, I shall sit here in your office." You can imagine my astonishment when, as I copied it out in due legal form, I discovered that he was leaving his entire property to me. He was a small, ferret-like man. When I looked up at his face, I could see a look of satisfaction in the sharp gray eyes beneath his white eyelashes. When I expressed my disbelief, he told me that he was a bachelor with scarcely any relatives, that he had known my family in his youth, had always heard me spoken of highly, and wished to leave his money to someone deserving. All I could do was stammer my thanks. I drew up the will properly and had him sign it. My secretary, who works with me, witnessed it. This blue paper is the will I mentioned, and these sheets are the drafts. He then said there were other documents I needed to see and understand: rent rolls, title deeds, mortgages, share certificates, and so forth. He declared that he would not be at ease until everything was settled, and asked me to come to his house in Norwood that night to complete the remaining business, taking the will with me. Remember, my boy, you must not say a word of this to your parents until everything is finished. We shall give them a little surprise, he said. He was so insistent on this point that he even made me swear an oath. As you can imagine, I was in no position to refuse him anything at that moment. The man was leaving me a great inheritance, and all he asked was that matters be conducted according to his wishes. I sent a telegram home saying that I had important business to attend to and did not know how long it would take. Mr. Oldacre told me to expect him for dinner at 9 o'clock and said that he himself would not return home until that hour. Owing to some difficulty in finding the house, it was nearly 9:30 when I arrived. When I entered the house, "One moment," said Holmes. Who opened the door? A middle-aged woman. I believe she was the housekeeper. And she was the one who gave her name to the authorities, was she not? Exactly so, said McFarlane. Please go on. Wiping the sweat from his damp forehead, McFarlane continued. The woman who opened the door led me into the sitting room. A modest supper was laid out on the table. After that, Mr. Jonas Oldacre and I went into his bedroom. He opened the heavy safe in the room and took out a large number of documents, which we proceeded to examine. By the time we finished, it was around 11 or 12 o'clock. In order not to disturb the servant, he told me to leave through the French window. In fact, the window had been open the whole time, from the moment I entered until I left. Was the curtain drawn? Asked Holmes. I'm not entirely sure, but I believe it was half drawn. Yes, now I remember. He pulled the curtain up in order to open the window fully. When I could not find my walking stick as I was leaving, he said, "Never mind the stick, my boy. Don't worry, it will turn up somewhere. You can collect it tomorrow when you come." When I left, the safe was open and the papers were stacked on the table. As it was so late, I could not return to Blackheath, and therefore spent the night at the Annerley Arms. I learned of this dreadful affair only from the newspaper the next morning. That is all I know. Lestrade raised his eyebrows several times as he listened to the man's curious story. When McFarlane finished, the inspector asked, "Is there anything else you wish to ask, Mr. Holmes?" "Nothing until we reach Blackheath." "I think you mean Norwood," said Lestrade. "Ah, yes. Of course, that must be what I meant," said Holmes with that enigmatic smile of his. Rather than accept that the keen mind before him could penetrate regions beyond his own grasp, Lestrade preferred to learn everything through direct experience. I noticed him studying Holmes with a look of curiosity. "It would be as well if we had a brief word at once, Mr. Holmes," he said. "Mr. McFarlane, there are 2 constables and a carriage waiting for you at the door." The broken-spirited young man rose and walked toward the door. As he left the room, he cast one last pleading glance at us. The constables placed him in the carriage, but Lestrade remained behind. Holmes had taken the draft of the will and was examining it with the utmost care. "There are some noteworthy points in these documents, are there not, Lestrade?" he said, pushing the papers toward him. The inspector looked them over. He seemed puzzled. "I can read the opening lines, the middle of the second page, and the last 1 or 2 lines," he said. "These parts are as clear as if they had been printed, but the writing in between is difficult to read. There are 3 places I cannot read at all." "And what conclusion do you draw from that?" asked Holmes. "What conclusion do you draw?" Lestrade retorted, "That it was written on a train. The clear portions were written while the train was standing at stations, the less legible parts while it was in motion, and the completely illegible portions while passing over level crossings. Any expert would tell you that such writing could only have been done on a suburban line, for only near a large city do you find level crossings occurring in such rapid succession. If we assume the man was writing the will throughout the journey, we may further conclude that the train was an express service that stopped only once between Norwood and London Bridge." Lestrade laughed. "These theories of yours are quite beyond me, Mr. Holmes," he said. "Pray tell me, what possible relevance has all this to the case? If this was written by Jonas Oldacre during a train journey yesterday, then part of the young man's story is confirmed. Is that not interesting? Why should a man write so important a document in such a careless manner unless he believed it to be of little consequence? Only a man who never expected his will to be carried out would write it so casually." "He signed his own death warrant when he wrote that will," said Lestrade. "So that is your view? Is it not yours as well?" "It is possible, but I do not believe the case is yet sufficiently clear." "Not clear? If this case is not clear, then no case on earth is clear. Everything is plain as day. Here we have a young man who unexpectedly learns that he will inherit a fortune if the old man dies. What does he do? He tells no one, sets out under the pretext of visiting a client, waits until the only other person in the house is asleep, kills his victim in his bedroom, burns the body on a pile of planks, and then goes calmly to a nearby hotel. The bloodstains in the room and on the walking stick were so faint that he thought he had committed a bloodless murder, and by destroying the body he believed he had removed every trace that could implicate him. Is it not all perfectly obvious?" "My dear Lestrade, that is precisely what strikes me as strange," said Holmes. "Everything is too obvious. With all your qualities, how excellent it would be if you added a little imagination. Put yourself in the suspect's place. Would you choose the very night on which the victim had written his will to commit the murder, knowing full well that the 2 events would inevitably be connected? Would that not be dangerously rash? And would you commit the crime knowing that the servant had opened the door to you and was aware of your presence in the house? Finally, after taking such pains to dispose of the body, would you casually leave behind your walking stick an object that could serve as evidence of the crime? You must admit, Lestrade, that it is illogical. As for the walking stick, Mr. Holmes, you know as well as I do that murderers often lose their composure and act in ways no normal person would. He may not have dared to return to the room to retrieve it. Can you propose another theory that fits the known facts?" "I can propose at least half a dozen theories offhand," said Holmes. "Consider this one, quite plausible and a gift to you. While the old man was showing important documents, a passing tramp saw the scene through the half-drawn curtains of the window. As soon as the solicitor left, he entered through the window, seized the walking stick, killed Oldacre, burned the body, and fled. Why would a tramp burn the body? For the same reason you say McFarlane did. To destroy the evidence. The tramp may have wished to conceal the fact that a murder had been committed. Then why did he leave without taking anything? Because the papers were not of a kind he could turn into cash." Although Lestrade shook his head with an unconvinced air, he was no longer as confident as before. "You may pursue your tramp, Holmes. While you do so, we shall focus on the man we have in custody. Time will show which of us is right. But I would draw your attention to one point. The papers were untouched, and the only person who would have wanted them to remain there was McFarlane himself, since he was the heir and knew the entire estate would pass to him." This remark seemed to make an impression on Holmes. "I do not deny that the existing evidence strongly supports your theory," he said. My only purpose is to point out that other theories are possible. As you say, time will show which of us is right. For now, good day to you. I shall call at Norwood later today to learn how matters stand." After Lestrade departed, Holmes began making meticulous preparations for the day's work. He was in high spirits, having found a case entirely to his taste. As he hurried into his overcoat, he said, "As I told you, I shall go first to Blackheath." "Why not to Norwood?" "Because this case involves two distinct events occurring in succession. The police, focusing on the second event because it involves a crime, are making a mistake. In my view, the most sensible course is to clarify the first event, the sudden drafting of a will that leaves the man's property to an entirely unexpected heir. No, my dear fellow, I do not think you will be of use today. There appears to be no danger, or I would not dream of going without you. I hope that when we meet this evening, I shall be able to say that I have done something for the unfortunate young man who has entrusted his fate to me." He returned late that evening. Though he said nothing at first, I could tell from his anxious and gloomy expression that matters had not gone as he had hoped. He was dispirited. After seeking consolation in his violin for about an hour, he cast it aside and began to recount his misfortunes. "Things are going badly, Watson, worse than badly. I concealed it from Lestrade, but I swear that for the first time in my life, I fear Lestrade may be right and we may be wrong. Every instinct I possess points in one direction, yet the facts point in exactly the opposite. I am afraid that British juries have not yet reached the stage where they will trust my theories over the evidence presented by Lestrade." "Did you go to Blackheath?" "Yes, Watson, I did, and I learned that the deceased Oldacre was anything but a respectable man. McFarlane's father had gone out searching for his son. His mother was at home. She was a small, plump, blue-eyed woman, trembling with anger and fear. Naturally, she could not believe her son capable of such a crime, but upon hearing what had happened to Oldacre, she was neither shocked nor saddened. On the contrary, she spoke of him with such bitterness that she unwittingly strengthened the police's suspicions. Had her son heard these words, he might well have conceived hatred and evil thoughts toward Oldacre. He was less a man than a cunning and wicked ape, she said. He has never changed since his youth." "Did you know him when you were young?" I asked. "Yes, I knew him very well," she replied. "He was even one of my suitors. But thank God I turned away from him and married an honest man, poor though he was. While we were engaged, I heard something about him. He released a cat into a cage full of birds. That cruelty horrified me so deeply that I wanted nothing more to do with him." She rummaged through a drawer and produced a photograph. The woman's face in the photograph had been slashed to pieces with a knife. "That is me," she said. "He sent it to me on my wedding day, along with his curses. If he left his entire fortune to your son, he must at least have forgiven you," I suggested. She did not like that at all. "Neither my son nor I would accept a penny from that man, dead or alive," she cried. "The Almighty who punished that wretch will also show that he did not stain my son's hands with his blood." Try as I might, I could learn nothing from her that would support our hypothesis. In the end, I gave up and went on to Norwood. Deepdene House stands on its own grounds, a modern, striking brick building with a lawn and scattered shrubs. The burned timber was stacked to the right of the house, set back a little from the road. I have drawn you a rough plan on this page. The window on the left is that of Oldacre's bedroom. From the road, the interior is visible. That, at least, was the sole consolation of my day. Lestrade was not there when I arrived, but the chief constable attended me. They had conducted a thorough excavation, sifting through the ashes of the burned timber all day, and found not only charred organic remains, but also discolored metal discs. I examined them carefully. They were undoubtedly trouser buttons. I even managed to read the inscription on one of them, Hyams, the name of Oldeker's tailor. I then examined the lawn, but owing to the drought, it was hard as stone. The only thing I could determine was that a body or some large object had been dragged through the hedge beside the timber pile. All of this, of course, fitted the official theory. I spent an hour lying flat on my stomach under the August sun, which beat mercilessly on my neck, but when I finally stood up, I had nothing to show for it. After this fiasco, I turned my attention to the bedroom. The bloodstains were extremely faint, mere smears, but unquestionably fresh. The walking stick had been taken away, but the marks it left were also very indistinct. There is no doubt that the stick belonged to our client, since he himself admits it. I was able to identify footprints from 2 different individuals on the carpet. The absence of any third set of footprints works in favor of the opposing case. They score goal after goal, while we remain stuck at midfield. I glimpsed a tiny ray of hope, but it came to nothing. Most of the contents of the safe had been laid out on the table. The papers were placed in sealed envelopes. The police had opened several of them, but as far as I could tell, they were of little value. Judging from the passbooks, Mr. Oldeker was not particularly wealthy. It seemed to me that not all the papers were there. I sensed the absence of certain documents of greater value, though I could not find them. If we could prove that conclusively, we should shatter Lestrade's argument, for why would a man steal something he was about to inherit? When I could find no scent after turning every stone, I tried my luck with the servant. Mrs. Lexington is a small, dark, quiet, suspicious woman who prefers to observe people from the corner of her eye. I am certain she could tell us more if she wished, but she was extremely reserved. Yes, she admitted Mr. McFarlane at about 9:30. If only my hands had withered before I opened that door, she said. According to her, she went to bed at 10:30. Her room was at the far end of the house, and whatever happened in the master's bedroom could not have been heard by her. Mr. McFarlane left his hat and, as far as she remembered, his walking stick in the hall. She awoke to the sound of fire and believed the poor master must have been murdered. As for enemies, she said that every man has enemies, but Mr. Oldeker was very reclusive and dealt with no one outside his business affairs. She, too, had seen the buttons and was certain they belonged to the clothes Mr. Oldeker wore that night. As it had not rained for a month, the timber stack was bone dry and burned like kindling. When she reached it, she saw nothing but flames. She and the firemen alike detected the smell of burning flesh. She knew nothing of the papers or of Mr. Oldeker's private affairs. That, Watson, is the story of today's debacle. And yet, he clenched his thin hands with sudden determination. I know all this is wrong. I feel it in my bones. There is something undiscovered, and the servant woman knows it. I saw rebellion in her sullen eyes. That can have only one source, guilt. But there is no use dwelling on it further. If fortune does not favor us, I fear the Norwood affair will not earn a place among those adventures the public so eagerly awaits. But the man's appearance will influence the jury, will it not? I said, that is a dangerous thought, Watson. Do you remember the villain Bert Stevens, who sought our help in 1887? Could there have been a more gentle and innocent-looking fellow? You are right. If we cannot construct an alternative theory, the man is finished. The evidence against him is overwhelming. There is no loophole in the case file that might favor him, and as the investigation progresses, the evidence against him only grows. That said, I did notice something while examining the documents. It may lead us somewhere. When I studied Oldeker's passbook, I discovered why his balance was so low. Over the past year, he had written substantial checks to a man named Cornelius. I confess I am curious what sort of relationship would compel a retired builder to make such large payments to Mr. Cornelius. Could he have a hand in this affair? Cornelius may be a moneylender, but we have found no receipts explaining what these payments were for. With nothing else to go on, I must concentrate my investigation on the man who cashed Oldeker's checks. Yet I fear, my dear fellow, that in the end we shall be defeated, and Lestrade will send the man to the gallows and claim victory for Scotland Yard. I do not know whether Sherlock Holmes slept that night, but when I came down to breakfast, I found him pale and exhausted. The shadows around him made his already brilliant eyes appear even brighter. The carpet around his chair was littered with cigarette stubs and morning newspapers. On the table lay an open telegram. He tossed it to me. "What do you make of this, Watson?" It had come from Norwood and read, "Important new evidence. McFarlane's guilt established. I advise you to abandon the case. Lestrade." "It looks serious," I said. "Lestrade's little cry of triumph," said Holmes with a bitter smile. "Still, it is too early to abandon the case. Important new evidence is a double-edged sword, and it may cut in the opposite direction from the one Lestrade expects. Have your breakfast, and then we shall go together and see what can be done. I suspect I shall need your help and your moral support today." My friend Holmes had not eaten breakfast that morning, for it was his habit to abstain from food whenever he was under strain. More than once I had seen him tax his iron constitution to such an extent that he would go without a single mouthful until he collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Had I ventured, in my capacity as a physician, to remonstrate with him, his answer would invariably have been, "At this moment, I cannot afford to expend my energy and strength upon digestion." Thus it occasioned me no surprise when, as we set out together for Norwood that morning, he left his breakfast untouched upon the table. Deepdene House, a typical suburban villa possessing all the characteristics I have described, was already surrounded by a crowd of morbidly curious idlers. Lestrade met us just inside the garden gate. There was color in his face, and the air of triumph sat plainly upon his manner. "Well, Mr. Holmes," he cried, "have you managed to prove us wrong? Have you found the tramp you were looking for?" "I have not yet reached a conclusion," replied Holmes. "But we reached one yesterday, and today it has been confirmed. This time you must admit that we are a little ahead of you, Holmes." "Judging by your appearance, it must be something remarkable," said Holmes. Lestrade burst into laughter. "You don't enjoy being beaten any more than we do," said he. "No one can be right all the time, can they, Dr. Watson? Come this way, if you please. Before long, you will both be convinced that this murder was committed by John McFarlane." We passed first into the passage and then into a darkened hall. "After committing the crime, young McFarlane must have come here to fetch his hat," said Lestrade. "Now look at this." With a sudden movement, he struck a match, and we saw upon the white-painted wall a dark stain. As he brought the flame closer, it became clear that it was not a mere stain, but a perfectly distinct fingerprint. "Examine it with your lens, Holmes." I was about to do so. You are aware, of course, that no two fingerprints are ever identical. "I have heard something of the sort." "Then kindly compare that mark on the wall with the impression taken this morning, by my orders, from McFarlane's right thumb upon wax." When the wax impression was brought close to the blood mark upon the wall, it required no magnifying glass to see that the two were identical. I began to think that all was over for our unfortunate client. "That settles it," said Lestrade. "That settles it." I repeated involuntarily. "That settles it," said Holmes. There was something strange in his voice. I turned and saw that his face had assumed a curious expression. He appeared to be inwardly convulsed with delight. His eyes sparkled, and he seemed scarcely able to restrain a fit of laughter. My God, he cried at last. "Who would have thought it? How deceptive appearances may be. And yet, to look at him, what an innocent young fellow he seemed. A lesson in not trusting too much in our own preconceptions, is it not, Lestrade? Yes, some of us are a little too confident, said Lestrade. The impertinence of the remark was scarcely tolerable, yet we could not resent it. How fortunate that the young man pressed his right thumb against the wall while retrieving his hat from the rack. On reflection, it seems an entirely natural action. Holmes appeared outwardly calm, yet his whole body quivered with suppressed excitement. By the way, Lestrade, who made this important discovery, the servant, Mrs. Lexington, showed it to the night watchman. And where was the watchman at the time? In the murder room, to see that nothing was disturbed. Then why did the police fail to notice this fingerprint yesterday? There was no reason for us to make a detailed examination of the corridor. Besides, as you see, it is not in a very conspicuous position. True, it is not conspicuous. You have no doubt that this fingerprint was here yesterday as well. Lestrade stared at Holmes as though he believed my friend to have lost his reason. I confess that Holmes's gaiety and singular line of inquiry astonished me as well. I don't know whether you imagine that McFarlane slipped out of his cell in the middle of the night to strengthen the evidence against himself, said Lestrade, but any expert you consult will tell you that this fingerprint belongs to McFarlane. I have not the slightest doubt that it does. That is more than sufficient, said Lestrade. I am a practical man, Holmes, and when I find proof, I have my conclusion. I am going into the sitting room to write my report. You may join me there if you wish. Holmes had now recovered his composure, though his tone still betrayed his cheerfulness. This is a very unfortunate development, is it not, Watson? He said. And yet it contains certain interesting features which may still operate in our client's favor. I am glad to hear it, I replied earnestly. I had thought the man lost. There is no need for such despair, Watson. The truth is that this piece of evidence, upon which our friend Lestrade places so much importance, suffers from a very serious defect. Indeed? And what is that? Simply this: I know that this fingerprint was not here yesterday. Come, let's go outside and take a little walk in the sunshine. Though my mind was in confusion, I walked beside Holmes with a growing warmth of hope in my heart. Holmes circled the house, examining every side with care. He then re-entered the building and inspected everything from the cellar to the attic. Though most of the rooms were unfurnished, he examined them all with equal attention. At last, when we reached the upper corridor containing the 3 unused rooms, he was once again seized with delight. There is no doubt that this case has certain original features. Watson, he said, I believe the time has come to reveal our secret to our friend Lestrade. He has enjoyed the advantage up to now, but if I have read this problem correctly, it is our turn to smile. Yes, I think I see clearly how we must proceed. Holmes approached the Scotland Yard inspector, who was engaged in writing his report. It appears that you are writing your report, said Holmes. I am. Do you not think you are being a little hasty? I do not believe you have yet gathered all the evidence. Lestrade knew Holmes well enough to realize that he never spoke idly. He laid down his pen and looked at him with curiosity. What do you mean, Holmes? I mean that there is an important witness whom you have not yet examined. Can you produce this witness? I believe I can. Then produce him. I should do my best. How many constables have you at hand? 3. Excellent, said Holmes. Are they all strong men with powerful voices? They are, but I fail to see what their voices have to do with the matter. I shall explain, said Holmes. If you will summon them, I shall explain that, and 1 or 2 other points. 5 minutes later, the 3 constables stood in the room. There is a quantity of straw in the shed outside, said Holmes. Would you kindly bring 2 bundles of it? I shall require it to bring our witness before us. Thank you. You have matches in your pocket, Watson, have you not? And will you come with me to the upper landing, Lestrade? There was, as I've already said, a wide corridor there, passing the doors of 3 empty rooms. Holmes walked ahead of us to its far end, while the constables grinned and Lestrade regarded him with a mixture of curiosity, hope, and derision. Holmes stood before us like an actor upon a stage. May I trouble one of the men to fetch 2 buckets of water? Place the straw here, away from the walls. I think we are now ready. Lestrade's face was flushing with anger. I don't know whether you are making sport of us, he said, but if you have anything to tell us, there is no need for all this nonsense. You may be assured, my dear Lestrade, that everything I do has a sound reason. You will recall that only a few hours ago, when fortune smiled upon you, you allowed yourself a little mockery at my expense. You will forgive me, therefore, for this small ceremony. Watson, will you kindly open that window and set fire to the straw? I did as he directed. The dry straw crackled into flame, and under the influence of the draft, a gray vortex of smoke rolled down the corridor. Now let us see whether we can find our witness, Lestrade. If you please, gentlemen, will you all cry out together, fire? On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, fire! We shouted in unison. Thank you. Once more, if you please. Fire. One last time, gentlemen. Fire. Our voices must have echoed throughout all Norwood. We had scarcely fallen silent when something occurred that filled us all with amazement. A door at the far end of the corridor, which we had not previously observed, flew open, and a small elderly man darted out like a rabbit bolting from its burrow. Excellent, said Holmes calmly. Watson, would you pour a bucket of water over the straw? Allow me to present to you the most important missing witness in this case. Gentlemen, I give you Mr. Jonas Oldacre. Lestrade stared in astonishment at the suddenly appearing figure. Oldacre blinked his pale gray eyes, fringed with white lashes, as he looked at us and at the smoldering straw. He had a repulsive, cunning, and shifty countenance. What does this mean? Demanded Lestrade at last. What have you been doing there all this time? At the sight of Lestrade's flushed and furious face, Oldacre shrank back and gave a nervous laugh. I haven't harmed anyone. Harm no one. You did everything in your power to have an innocent man hanged. Had it not been for this gentleman, nothing would have stood in your way. The wretched creature burst into tears and whining. It was a practical joke. A joke? Indeed, it was not a very amusing one. Take this man downstairs to the sitting room. I shall follow presently. When the constables had taken him away, Lestrade continued, I did not wish to say this in front of my men, but I have no objection to speaking before Dr. Watson, I do not quite understand how you managed it, Holmes, but it is the most brilliant piece of work you have ever done. You have not only saved an innocent man's life, but you have also averted a scandal that would have ruined my reputation at the Yard. Holmes smiled and clapped him lightly on the shoulder. Do not fear, said he. Your reputation will not suffer. On the contrary, it will grow. A slight alteration or two in your report will show what a keen-witted officer Inspector Lestrade really is. You do not wish your name to appear? No, it is quite unnecessary. The work itself is reward enough for me. Perhaps one day, if I permit my indefatigable chronicler to write it down, my share may become known. What do you say, Watson? Come, let us have a look at that rat hole. At the end of the corridor, a space of some 2 yards had been partitioned off with laths, and its door had been concealed with great skill. In the dim light that filtered in from beneath the eaves were a few simple pieces of furniture, some books and newspapers, and a small supply of food and water. As you see, this is where being a builder proves useful, said Holmes as we left the place. He was able to construct this hiding place without assistance, except, of course, from the servant woman. "I strongly advise you to secure her as well, Lestrade. I shall follow your advice. But how did you know of the existence of this compartment?" "I was convinced that the man was concealed within the house. When I noticed that this corridor was 2 yards shorter than the one beneath it, his whereabouts became obvious. I reasoned that if we raised a fire alarm, he would not be able to remain where he was. We could, of course, have dragged him out with our own hands, but a small theatrical effect seemed appropriate. Besides, after your sarcastic remarks this morning, I felt you deserve a little surprise. You have certainly had your revenge. But how did you know he was in the house at all?" "From a fingerprint, Lestrade. When we both said 'that settles it,' we meant very different things. I knew that fingerprint had not been there yesterday. You will have noticed my attention to detail. Since I examined the corridor carefully yesterday, I was certain of it. Therefore, it must have been placed there during the night." "But how?" "Very simply. While sealing the packets, Jonas Oldacre asked McFarlane to press his thumb into the soft wax. He did so casually and naturally, and the young man may not even remember it. At the time, Oldacre himself probably had no idea how he would use that impression. But once he had retired to his lair and reflected, a plan occurred to him that would inevitably send McFarlane to the gallows. To take a mold from the wax bearing McFarlane's fingerprint was child's play. All that remained was to prick his own finger with a needle, smear blood upon the wax cast, and at night leave McFarlane's fingerprint upon the wall. He may have done it himself, or he may have made the servant woman do it. I would wager that among the documents in his hiding place you will find the wax mold bearing McFarlane's fingerprint." "Magnificent!" cried Lestrade. "Magnificent! You have explained everything. But what was the ultimate purpose of this elaborate scheme?" It was a pleasure to see the inspector's superior air give way to the attitude of a pupil questioning his master. "Considering the malignity, vindictiveness, and cunning of the man waiting for us below, the motive is not hard to explain. Did you know that McFarlane's mother once rejected Oldacre? Of course you did not. That is why I told you that you ought to have gone to Blackheath before Norwood. This vindictive man had never forgotten the slight, though he had lacked an opportunity for revenge until now. His recent years had not been prosperous. He had probably lost heavily on the stock exchange. To escape his creditors, he devised a plan. The man to whom he wrote those large checks, Cornelius, was none other than himself. I have not yet traced the checks, but I am confident they were cashed in some provincial town where Oldacre occasionally lived as Mr. Cornelius. He intended to disappear entirely and live henceforth under that name. Yes, that seems perfectly reasonable. According to his plan, he would vanish without a trace and at the same time wreak his revenge upon his former love. By convincing the world that her only son had murdered him, he would reach the height of infamy. And he very nearly succeeded. The idea of the will provided a perfect motive, inducing McFarlane to visit the house secretly, retaining his walking stick, planting animal remains and buttons in the timber pile. All this was exceedingly clever. Until 2 hours ago, even I could see no way out of the trap. But the man lacked one essential quality. A true artist knows when to stop. He did not. In trying to improve an already perfect work, he ruined it entirely. The noose was already around poor McFarlane's neck. "Come, Lestrade, let's go downstairs. I have 1 or 2 questions to put to the man." The miserable creature sat in the sitting room of his own house, with a constable on either side of him. "It was only a joke, sir. Nothing but a joke," he whined incessantly. "I only hid to see what would happen in my absence. You don't suppose I would have allowed any harm to come to poor McFarlane, do you?" "That will be for the jury to decide," said Lestrade. "But even if you are not charged with attempted murder, you will certainly be charged with conspiracy. And your creditors will no doubt seize the bank account of Mr. Cornelius," added Holmes. The little man started and glared at Holmes. "I owe you my thanks," he said bitterly. "Perhaps one day I shall repay you." Holmes smiled with calm courtesy. "I doubt you will find the opportunity within the next few years," said he. "By the way, what did you place beside your old trousers in the timber pile? A dog? A rabbit? Will you not tell us? Dear me, how discourteous! 2 dead rabbits would have been quite sufficient for both the bloodstains and the other remains. If you ever record this case, Watson, you may say that it was rabbits."